Am I prepared to go live? Don't know. We'll find out. The way we find out is we click the live button. Good morning. Happy Friday. Just going to click through here, make sure that I'm live. I don't want to view my profile photo. I've looked at that quite a bit. I'm actually due to change my profile photo. I'm bored of it. It's time for a new one. But I'm also lazy and have more interesting things to do. And so that is how it is. Okay, so it looks like I'm live. I currently have 0 viewers. I'll save the good stuff for after the viewers come. I'll tuck this necklace into my shirt. Just getting steady here. It's the pre-show. It's like the green room, if they call it that. One of the distinctions that's been kind of live for me, and when I say live for me, I mean it's been showing up in my own life and in the lives of my clients, and that's pretty much the way it always works in coaching. There's something just about I haven't yet distinguished like a law around it that I could then point to and be like, here's why this is. There's almost certainly a way this tends to work out, but one of the distinctions that's been really live for me lately has been let me give like some kind of context before I then provide the distinction. It's where I notice myself and other people getting caught on like, what do I want to do, or what am I supposed to do, or where should I be putting my attention, or what's the thing I need to do? And then we put a lot of attention on trying to figure that out. And the distinction or the stand I notice that resolves all of that, because you can spend, and if you're one of these people, maybe you can spend a great amount of time, hours, days, weeks, months, years, trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. And it doesn't always seem to resolve it for you. What actually takes your life out of this circular pattern and then starts you moving forward in a straight line towards what's next is the distinction of choosing. So it doesn't matter what, choose something. When we choose, when we shift into a context of choosing, our life starts to move forward. And then once you've chosen something, you're going to start to get feedback from yourself, your body, your spirit, the world around you. Is this the thing I want to do? You'll figure it out really quickly. You know, I'm at a restaurant. Would I rather have spaghetti or a hot dog? I'm going to order the hot dog. Crap, I'm not wanting that. I wish I had the spaghetti. Next time, it's going to be very clear for you what there is to get. We get stuck trying to figure out what we want because we're trying to manage all of the what would I call it? Like the regret, the future regret we imagine when we've ordered that hot dog and we have to sit with it. But that's a part of life. And so what we're actually trying to do is we're trying to shrink, we're trying to contract away from some of the abundance of life. If I figure everything out first, then I'll never have to feel regret at making the wrong choice. What that actually does is it has us get stuck in trying to figure out the right choice, and then our life stops moving forward. So we never really make the wrong choice, but we never make any choice. And then consequently, you get people that are like 60, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I waited this long. I wish I'd chosen sooner. Yeah, that's the consequence. It's like this long-term, deep, kind of ongoing regret that you have moment by moment. So choose. When you're not sure what to do, when you're not sure of what there is to take on, when you're not sure what you want to do, choose something and do it. And you'll discover, if you're willing to stick with it for a little while, do I want to keep doing this? No. Okay, great. Then there's something else to do. Anyhow, that's been up for me lately. What else is up that I can share in the pre-show? I have here a pair of jeans, but these jeans are not normal jeans. These jeans are armored. Look, it says defend yourself, reinforced with aramid. Is that meant to be armored? Aramid fiber. So these jeans have like knee pads and they're made of Kevlar because I've been scooting around on my one wheel and I got a bunch of road rash here on my elbow because I took a spill. I was getting too aggressive, too excited. The one wheel's great fun, and I've never been on like a road kind of vehicle or bike or anything that felt so much like surfing or snowboarding. So it's super blast. It's really fun to carve the roads, but I was carving up the neighborhood I was in and I was going downhill and getting a little aggressive, a little bit ahead of myself, a little bit too excited, and my board started to wobble and I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to bail in time. And sure enough, down I went. And so I scratched up my knee, I scratched up my elbow, I sent Bea a text message saying, yeah, I took a little spill. I'm okay. I knew that that was going to worry her because she was already concerned about Adam on this crazy device. And I came home and cleaned myself up and then immediately went online and bought a bunch of safety gear. So I've got like some armored jeans here. I have an armored pair of cargo pants to wear that have knee pads and stuff in them. These are a bit too small. I have to return them. I mean, we want to look stylish while being safe, right? That's important. Um, Someone asked, we're getting the silly stuff out of the way first. So if you're sort of like, this guy just talks about bullshit, hang in there, because soon he's going to talk about like the bullshit that matters. Uh, One of my friends asked me, like, what's the headset you use for your live? This guy right here. It sounds really good. Your audio always seems good. I'm looking into headsets. Credit to my friend Toku, because there was a moment in the early days of my coaching where I used this device called Apple AirPods. These are AirPod Pros, but that's not really the point. I was using Apple's headphones, and my clients would be like, man, I can hear literally every single thing that is happening around you. You know, someone would walk by in a conversation when I was out at a park and be like, boy, I can hear those people. They sound like they're right beside you. And I was like, oh, they're literally just walking by. Or I'd eat something, or there'd be a truck that would drive by in the distance and they'd hear it. And so I asked my friend Toku, who's also a coach, hey, do you use a headset or anything? Do you have any thoughts? Do you know? And he was like, yes, I did a research. I ordered a whole bunch and I tested them all out. And this is the one I think is the best. And so I just cannibalized his research, and that's the headset I use, and I highly recommend it. So I'm going to share the headset is this one right here. It's the Voyager 5200. It's a Plantronics headset. Apparently there was almost like a run on them at the start of the pandemic because we'd all switched to Zoom and people were buying new headsets. This one comes, you can see on the bottom of this box, you get a headset, you get a charging kit, and you get a USB dongle. And all the dongle does is it sort of makes it easier for your headset to connect with your computer. It sort of ensures that the headset's connecting via Bluetooth to a device made by the same company, so they can just connect a little bit better rather than using your computer's native US Bluetooth. None of that really matters. The point is this headset, the Plantronics Voyager 5200, I highly recommend it. I've got a whole bunch of them over here because we send them as gifts to people often. Whenever I start working with a coach, it's one of the first things I send them because as a coach and a leader who works over the phone, your two main tools are your hearing, your listening, and your speaking. And when we use a headset that picks up a lot of noise, we're putting something in the way of our speaking getting to people. We're often not aware of this, and most of the world just tolerates it. They don't think about it. They don't even distinguish it. They're not even aware of it. There's just like this low-grade kind of annoyance. If you've ever been on a phone call with someone where they're like banging around, they're moving stuff, and you can hear it, they're unloading the dishwasher, whatever it is, and you're like, oh, it's tolerate it, but it's kind of annoying. You know, it gets in the space for you. And people don't tell you that it's annoying or that it's having an impact. It just happens. And so what having a really good quality headset that cancels out noise for you and that provides a really clear channel, so the only thing being communicated is your voice, it removes distractions so that your leadership can come through as cleanly as possible. It's part of our job as a leader. We're always looking on our side and trying to clean up our side of the fence so that what we have to deliver to someone, the training, the coaching, the leadership that we have to provide them comes through as cleanly as possible. There's as little in the way as possible to the message we're trying to convey. Okay, I see we got 3 viewers, but no comments. Who's here? Who are you, people? Speak, be known, tell me your name. I'm gonna it's just about time to pour the tea. I'm finishing up the last of this coffee. Let's do that. Okay. I've poured my coffee. It's time for the live tea, or I finished my coffee. Live tea pour. Get ready. Here's the cup. Here's the teapot, and it's happening. Get that nice long pour directly over the keyboard. Who is this man? How courageous is he? The most daring thing he does all week. Let's have that first sip. Lovely. Just a little bit of Earl Grey. I like Earl Grey a lot because Jean-Luc Picard drank Earl Grey, and I think he's amazing. What's up, Andrew? Nice to see you. Andrew's coming in from the finest budget hotel of all of Kelowna, and he gets possession of his house today. Congrats, brother. That's so cool. Kelowna's a beautiful place too. You can send me bottles of wine. There's lots of nice wine and stuff up in the area that Andrew's moved to. It's a beautiful part of British Columbia, the province that he and I both live in. Um, there's something else I was going to share, but I can't remember what it was, so I think we'll just probably dive right in here today. Um, we had a few topics last time that Tibby and Andrew provided that I didn't get to, so we're gonna go to those today. I'm gonna start, I think, by talking about. Oh, hey, Tara, nice to see you. The being of audacity. That's Tara's saying. Me pouring tea over my keyboard is the essence of audacity. Maybe very true. So I think we'll start with three principles. Um, Three principles is a, let me grab a book off my shelf to show that kind of speaks to this. So three principles is a modality in coaching. It's not really a modality. It's more like a philosophy or a kind of perspective on how humans are. And then there's like a whole bunch of, I guess the modality would be like, given this truth, how do we coach that? So it's sort of like a philosophy for the way human beings are, and then an attached like approach to coaching. One of the more famous coaches that is sort of like in the three principles world is this guy right here, Michael Neal. And the first book he wrote as he started to get into three principles is this book, The Inside Out Revolution, which has a really nice cover on it. It says the byline here is the only thing you need to know to change your life forever. I'm like, man, that's way better than my byline. The leader's guide to what the mirror doesn't show you. That's kind of neat. I wonder what it'll show me. But then here, the only thing you need to know to change your life forever. Damn. So I always get the three principles wrong. Does he have them here? I'm going to just see if I can find him. I'm totally going to get these wrong. Yes. So the three principles have kind of like three parts to them, and I'm going to butcher them. So I apologize in advance, and I highly recommend you read this book or a book by a man named Sid Banks. He's written a lot of books. I'm going to just put his name here so you can look him up. And not Sid Laurie Banks. I don't know who that person is. Someone that Facebook wants to tag. When I want to tag someone, Facebook's like, "Nuh-uh, not going to do it for you." Then when I type something like leadership, it's like, "Great, let me tag someone named Phil." I'm like, "What? What are you up to? What is your agenda, Facebook?" So Sid Banks was a plumber, a Scottish plumber who was actually attending. He and his wife were struggling. They were attending a seminar on Salt Spring Island, which is an island next to the island I live on here in British Columbia. So he was in my turf, and the seminar they were at was not very good, and he and another person were talking about it and like on a break, and he was planning to leave, and he got into this conversation with another participant there, and they were having a conversation back and forth about who had the lowest self-esteem of the two of them. It was a fun conversation, right? A bit of a downward spiraling conversation. And Sid Banks said, "Well, it's definitely me. I have the lowest self-esteem." And the person that was there with him said, "No, that's not the case at all. You just believe that about yourself. You just think that about yourself." And that sort of interaction sparked an awakening in Sid Banks. So first of all, this idea that like from his belief that he had the lowest self-esteem, everything else kind of flourished, right? As a result of this one belief, all of the other stuff that was ailing him kind of grew from the seed of that belief. If I believe I have the lowest self-esteem, then I'm going to relate to everything that shows up through that lens. I'm going to like, oh, this happened, and that's because I believe I have such low self-esteem, and then I did this as a result of that belief, and blah, blah, blah. So it all builds on top of it. So his friend kind of sparked this awakening inadvertently. He wasn't trying to do anything. And Sid Banks, as the story goes, became enlightened in that moment. He became awakened. And his story is quite interesting. I recommend reading about it. It's really a neat kind of story. And Sid Banks didn't really know what he was going to do, but he decided in this moment to take a bit of a break from his union plumbing job or whatever it was, and just sit in this awakening that was happening for him. And over time, he just started to be in conversation with people, and people started to catch wind of this person who was enlightened. It was like, oh, there's this guy, he's become enlightened. You should connect with him. And uh, it it the whole three principles grew out of this. And so Sid's story is quite remarkable. He ended up meeting with like really amazing people that caught wind of his awakening and would come and sit with him and meet with him, and Sid would give like lectures. I find you can, if you Google like Sid Banks talks, you can find some really interesting ones, and he's quite interesting to listen to speak. He's very humble. He's just sort of like, he'll say things like, "What you're trying to get is sort of just like a nice feeling. You're trying to get just like a nice feeling, and that's all there is to it." So the whole premise there is we don't have to try to strive for development. We don't have to try to create money. We don't have to try to run after and get enough food. We don't have to try to get a million followers. Like all of that stuff can start to fall away. And all there really is to do is to go inwards and to notice, like, how am I being? And so the principles grew around the way Sid showed up and his kind of teachings, if you like. He called himself a, I can't remember the term, like a philosophizer or something. He was very clear that he didn't have any formal training, and yet sort of was this person who was ultimately thrust into doing some philosophical work. So the main core principles, there's three principles to the three principles. I'm not going to try to get those right. I'm just going to try to give you a bit of like a snapshot of what it's speaking to. The first is that like one significant aspect of three principles is well-being is innate and is always the state our body returns to. And so what's sort of being said there is like absent forces acting upon us as humans, absent us getting our fingers in the machinery, we will naturally return to a state of well-being. Now, to be clear, we might have been trained to start to like put our hands into the machinery of that well-being kind of innate returning to, and so we're gumming it up. In our attempts to help ourselves get better, we're actually stopping the system from working to get ourselves better. So that's kind of like one of the big parts is well-being is innate. You can come to it. The second sort of thing that comes out of these principles is this idea that like everything is created from our mind. Our mind creates everything. And as a result, the third kind of, these aren't the principles I'm giving you. These aren't the three principles. These are sort of like conclusions that arrive from the base three principles. You have to go read about the three principles. But the third thing that kind of comes out is if you're feeling bad, what you're actually feeling is you're thinking. It's the way you feel is a function of how you think. And so there's like some incredible power in three principles. And that power can come from like this awareness of, wow, my thinking, my thoughts are determinative. If I believe I'm the person with the lowest self-esteem, then I'm going to naturally create a world around me that's a reflection of that. And that's going to reinforce my thinking. And then that actually kind of causes the problem of my system can't return itself to its innate state of well-being. So let's take a sip of tea here. So there's some incredible wisdom in three principles. Like a lot of what it provides people is this letting go of doing things like personal development to get somewhere. A lot of people approach transformational work, personal development, coaching because they believe if only they had these results over here, then they would feel the way they want to feel. Now that's bad coaching, or maybe not bad coaching. It's just like not particularly masterful coaching because it's, if we support the client to create that without digging any further, we're just helping them repeat the same cycle they've been in for the last 40 years of their life. We're just going to help them go through it even faster. They're going to get that result that they want quicker, and then they're going to discover that didn't give them what they wanted faster, and then they're going to go after the next result even faster, and then, so on and so forth. So three principles helps people often drop all of that. It sort of falls away because they start to realize, oh, I don't need to do something. There's nothing I need to land in this really beautiful feeling that I want. That's a gorgeous thing. That's a real value. This is similar. This idea of innate well-being is very similar to in ontological work, what we would call your essential nature, your essence. So in our superhero book right here, Who Do You Think You Are? And in a lot of ontological work, the foundation is that there's an innate state, there's a natural set of qualities of being or way of showing up in the world that you and all of us have that is uniquely our own, and that is always available. So if part of who I am as a man is connection and wit, we'll say, and passion, that experience, that state of life is always available to me, no matter what I'm doing, no matter what's going on. Hey, Tom, it's nice to see you, brother. Long time. And so three principles mirrors that, right? When they talk about this innate state of well-being always being available, that I would assert is analogous to in ontological work, ontological leadership, where we're like, passion, connection, whatever's your essential nature is always available to you, no matter what you're doing. You could be doing the most boring thing in the world. Passion is available. You can have an experience and the being of passion available in amidst those circumstances. So three principles and deep ontological work kind of point us back to the same internal state. And the gift of these states, the gift of what it's pointing to, is the opportunity for us to start to create a life that is beautiful regardless of our circumstances. Doesn't matter what's going on around you, there's a profound, beautiful, spiritual, incredible experience of life that is available for you in that moment. Not after the circumstances changes, but right now. That's cool. So on that regard, I am super aligned with three principles, and I think the work being done in that camp is great. There's a but coming. So what I perceive to be the problem with this, I should share first where am I speaking from in this. So I've read a bunch on three principles, I've watched a lot of videos, and there was something I started to notice with people that pursued three principles. And I was like, there's something off here. And I'm going to speak about that. But when I noticed this, I wanted to check my feet. I was like, I don't want to just make assumptions without swimming in the water myself. Because I see that a lot. I see a lot of coaches that don't get trained as a coach, and then they tell people why training's not that good. Fuck you. Go get trained. Then tell people if it's not that good. So I didn't want to be that person. I really wanted to, like, if I'm going to have something to say about this, I want to immerse myself first rather than just witnessing it from outside of it and then making judgments and telling people about those. So I got in touch with some people that were in the Three Principles community. I hired one of the people that lectures a lot on this work, and we had a bunch of coaching sessions, which were not particularly impactful for me. What I experienced in these coaching sessions was I would ask a question, and then that person would talk for a very long time and tell me a story about a time when a thing happened, or tell me a story about Sid, and I would sit there and listen and end it and be like, I'm not really sure what happened. And then if I brought that, he would say, well, don't worry about it. It's going to shift for you. That maybe it would shift for me if I sat with it long enough, but um, I don't find that very compelling, and I didn't find it particularly transformative, and I didn't find that he didn't the way he was being with me did not leave me feeling very held or gotten in that work. It was sort of like, oh, I understand the problem you have, but don't worry, it's going to shift. Okay, got it. So I guess I just set aside the feeling I have. It's not to say he needed to manage it for me. It's more to point to, like, there was a way that he beed with me that did not leave me feeling like, oh wow, I really feel this guy really gets me, and he can help me see where I am and why this is showing up. Instead, it was like, don't worry about it, it'll shift. Okay. So that was a little bit frustrating, and I didn't find that particularly empowering. The other thing I noticed was that in my line of work, I'm really keyed into, like, when I meet with someone, I'm like, what is the being that presents me? What I mean by that is not what do they do, not how do they look, not how are they dressed, not what are they saying, but like how fully expressed do they feel and how conscious do they feel in terms of, like, the world around them and they're showing up in that world, and like what impact do they have. And when people do a lot of work and start to address their being, what you tend to notice in their presence is there's like a magnetism to them, and there's an authenticity and a freedom, and there's sort of like a we take note. There's like this powerful experience that comes when we are with someone whose being is really developed, who's put a lot of work into transformation. It's not that they're trying to like impress us. It's not that they're trying to be powerful with us. It's simply that the very nature of a human being who has a lot of freedom and has moved a lot of their egoic, fear-based stuff out of the way, it is magnetic and it is powerful simply to be around that kind of person. And what I found was a lot of the people in Three Principles had this they talked about their freedom, but their being didn't occur very powerful. And the coach that I was working with, who was like, one of the higher level people in this kind of world, his being was uh like it didn't occur as powerful, and it certainly wasn't very magnetic. So that was like how that's where I'm speaking from. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm saying this is where my noticing of Three Principles and where this opinion I'm offering comes from. That's the basis I have, the background. So the other thing, the big thing I noticed that happens in Three Principles is basically a form of spiritual bypassing, where what happens is every time people start to feel sad or start to feel angry or start to feel any kind of feeling that is uncomfortable for them, they immediately go to, oh, this feels bad, but I feel bad because it's a product of my thinking, and therefore change my thinking, and now I'll feel good. And what that creates is an allergy to feeling bad. I'm not suggesting that we should all go and start cutting ourselves or creating suffering in our lives and feel bad. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the lows of life are every bit as fundamental to life as the highs are. The joy and the happiness and the feeling good is every bit as important as the sadness and the grief and the anger, feeling sad. And so what happens with Three Principles, and I don't believe that this is the case with all of the coaches. I'm sure there's some that really kind of work with the wholeness of the spectrum of human condition, but a lot of people, especially those that get into it early on, they have that initial epiphany like, oh my God, I'm not my feelings. Oh my God, I can change how I'm thinking and my feelings can shift. But then they get stuck there and they don't progress beyond it. They don't reach this point where they can find the beauty and the joy and the innate well-being in those moments of the depth of sadness, in those moments of the fury of the furnace of anger. That becomes unavailable to them. And so they end up living kind of what occurs or what feels like a bit of a half-life, which is not a very powerful being that you end up feeling from them, right? You feel sort of like this, almost a little bit of superficiality. And there's sort of like a lack of like, they tell you how they're like everything's great and joyful, but you're sort of like, yeah, there's something about this gold coin you're showing me that feels counterfeit. There's something missing. I don't know what it is. There's a weight or something to it. So that I notice is one of the consequences of uh, I don't know if consequences is fair, but that's something I notice a lot in the Three Principles community. The second thing that I notice a lot of is that there is a lack of capacity or ability for people to be responsible for their impact. The way this happens is that they start to put attention on like, how do they feel? And then letting that guide, what am I thinking? Change my thinking. Now I feel good. And that becomes their MO. That becomes their prime driver. How do I feel? And so sometimes when you'll try to reflect to someone like, hey, I just want to share, like, here's the impact, what they get is like, oh, I'm really sorry you feel that way. I feel really good. And, my bad, I don't mean any harm to you. And I feel great. So I'm just going to keep doing my thing. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with showing up that way. But that is a fundamental lack of leadership. And the reason that's a lack of leadership is because if I can't be responsible for my impact, if I can't own that there's something about the way I showed up, intentional or otherwise, that had a particular impact, then there's nothing I can do to change the way it goes in the future. And so what happens is I become the sort of leader who like creates these results over here, but then all of the stuff that's kind of in the wake of my path, all of the stuff where I keep having people be like, Adam, I appreciate where you're coming from, but you're kind of leaving me feeling bad. And I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry you feel bad. That's not how I feel. And I'm really clear that's not what I mean. So what ends up happening is I create a bunch of beautiful results and I leave a bunch of people feeling bad behind me. And I start to come to this approach of making things happen in life where I'm like, that's just the way life is. A bunch of people are going to feel bad behind me, but I feel good, and that's that. And it's not to say that's not wrong. It's just that's where their leadership stops growing. We're never going to make everyone happy. But what we can do is we can be conscious and responsible for our impact, and we can start to take a look there, and that allows us to step further and further and further up into our leadership. Uh, I want to read something to you that I was just reading today. This is from Werner Erhardt's course, Being a Leader, which Bay and I went down to Cancun to take with Werner Erhardt because we were like, man, that guy's getting old. He's like 84 or something like that. And we don't want to we don't want to get to the point where we're like, oh, he's passed away. If only we'd gone and trained with him while he was still alive. So we're like, we got to make this happen. So we went to do that. Close unused applications. Your live stream is experiencing performance issues. You know what? I'm experiencing performance issues with you, live stream. Close messages. Oop, nope. Oh, I guess I'll hide it. So here we go. This is what Werner Erhard says about, he calls it a certain kind of listening. A certain kind of listening. So this is in the Being a Leader course, part of what's taught is speaking as a leader and also listening as a leader. And we don't often think about listening as a leader. We're like, oh yeah, you sit down and you listen to people. And in fact, there's a deeper, more profound way to listen to people than listening to them. And so that's what Werner's distinguishing here. I just want to read you this first paragraph here, which says, an effective leader listens to all of what the people they are leading have to say about the following things: the way things are, the why people are, sorry, let me start over. The way things are, why things are that way, what's wrong with all of that, the solutions that they have had, the hoped for or dreamt of future, if only it was this way, the resigned to or worried about or feared of future, the future that this person and these people you are leading have been given by their authority, and that we will work hard for it future, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's a bunch of words, and Werner tends to be a little bit loquacious, overly verbal, just like I am for using the word loquacious. But the point here is that as a leader, we don't just listen to like the feedback and say, I'm sorry you feel that way. As a leader, we really receive that. Oh, there is something showing up for this person, and my job as a leader is to really get this person, to leave them feeling gotten. And what I find is that three principles does not help people. It actually moves them away from giving the people they lead a real experience of being gotten. Just like when I worked with that coach, I didn't really feel gotten when I told him, I feel like you're just talking a lot, and I don't really feel like I'm getting much out of this, and I'm not sure where to go. So I believe three principles has a lot of beauty and goodness in it, and I think it can really be a profound shift for people, especially early on. If you've been spending a lot of your life kind of swept away in your emotions, then three principles can really open things up for you. It can really help you get away from living your life as your feelings to starting to see, oh, I'm not my feelings, and things can be different regardless of the circumstances around me. That's a profound shift. But I notice a lot of people then get stuck there, and that's as far as they progress. And what that does is it leaves them further and further allergic to being with all of what there is to be human. They become spiritually bypassing. And so that's what I don't think works so well in three principles. Also, I find a lot of the speakers really boring, not super engaging, a lot of stories about Sid Banks. And Sid Banks is cool. He's interesting to listen to, but after a while, I'm like, yeah, I get it. He, did this and he thought that. See what you guys have written here. Andrew Mundy writing says, I still have not read The Inside Out Revolution, but I've dived into a fair amount of Michael Neill's programs. I found him to be a great educator and facilitator, but find that his coaching conversations do not really go anywhere. That's what I found too. There's there's a pernicious nature to coaching, which is that um, you can get away with a lot in this profession. Like if I am coaching someone and I say, you've just had a profound insight, I can just sort of, it's almost like inception, like by me saying that, you're going to then go, oh, I don't know what the insight is, Adam. What do you mean? And I can go, I'm going to let you sit with that. I haven't really helped you get to anything. I've kind of done something sneaky, which is I've asserted that you just had an insight, and now I'm leaving it for you to sort of shoehorn yourself into the assertion I've made. You can get away with that in coaching. And I find Michael Neal's coaching, he's very extravagant. He's an actor by trade initially. He's very entertaining, but I don't think his coaching is particularly potent myself. Andrew says that this is what I've noticed as well. There's a lot of 3P coach speaking in this space, and it just feels like a good conversation, a nice conversation. And he says, I've been reading Speaking Being on your recommendation, Adam. That's a book, Werner Erhard book. I've absolutely loved it so far. A lot of great additions to the work I started in AC. Yeah, Speaking Being is a book. It's a big, giant, fat book, but it's a two parts. One part is a transcript of Werner Erhard leading the Landmark Forum, which is really cool. You get to see a lot of his brilliance. You also get to see a lot of like kind of the asshole that he was being in the early days. Now he says, I was bringing that intentionally because back then I think it was the 70s, so much of the culture was on like feel good, everything's nice, love you, love you, love you, like almost like a saccharine sweet kind of love. And so he was trying to cut through that. But you can read it and be like, oh, this kind of seems a little abusive. So you have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt. But there's a lot of like him working with people where it's really brilliant how they've got this sort of thing that they're trying to get him into, and he just stands outside of it and is like, you're trying to pull me into this game with you, and I'm not going to do it. Really cool. Okay, so we've talked about what I think about 3 principles. That is handled. Andrew, you wanted me to talk about Andrew's question from last week. Thanks for bringing it forward, Andrew. Can you cover this question on context? And the question is, what are some ways to support someone in seeing the current context they are in and also supporting them to choose their next step? So let's talk about what is meant by context. Our context it's like the set of beliefs we have, the actions we take as a result of those beliefs, and the world, the environment around us that is created as a result of the actions we take from those beliefs. So if I believe, or if I'm raised with a belief, and then that becomes my belief, that you have to work hard to make money, then the actions I will take is I will seek out jobs that reward me with a lot of money for working very hard, or I will predictably not work very hard and find ways to be okay with not having much money. Those are one of the two choices that kind of arise out of that belief. Remember that our beliefs never occur to us like a belief we've made up. They occur to us like the truth. That's why we get so mucked into problems and stuck, because we don't realize it's a belief. We can have a new belief. We hold it like the truth. So I have a belief, you got to work hard to make money. And let's say I choose that first one. I'm finding myself in jobs that reward me with a lot of money for working very hard. What that's going to do is it's going to create a world around me, a concrete world around me, that's a reflection of that belief and those actions. So I'm going to be surrounded by other people that are also working very hard and making a lot of money working very hard. And I'm going to judge people who like are getting a lot of money not working very hard as like lazy or a cheat or maybe a liar or a thief. And the people that are around me in the world I've created are also going to feel that way. We are in a shared belief and a shared environment that kind of mirrors that belief. And so the kind of consequence of all this is that environment then reinforces that my belief is not just a belief, it's truth. So if you told me, Adam, it's just a belief. It's not true that you have to work hard to make money. There's many ways to make money. I'm going to look in the world that I've created and I'm going to be like, no, look, here's people working hard. And that guy got fired just last week because he was slacking off. And look, here's this person I judge for blah, 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 blah. So the world I end up creating around me reinforces my belief. And guess what happens then? From those beliefs, now even stronger, I double down on the actions I take that are consistent with the belief. And then from there, I create even more of a world around me that's a reflection. So that's a context. It's a perfect circle. It's like a a sphere. There's no edge to it. And it's very hard for us to see that context. And when we want to create something in our life that kind of seems unavailable to us, what we're up against is the context. So for example, what most people in the context I've just drawn out will settle for is they'll either be like, I'm willing to work really hard and then I can stop working hard. I'll make a bunch of money and then I can retire at 65 and start relaxing. Great. That is basically inside the belief that you have to work hard to make money. So if I want to get a bunch of money, I got to work hard. And then if I want at some point to not have to work so hard, I will have to have already amassed a bunch of money, because not working hard means I'm not going to get any money. So kind of like on one side of the context for the first part of their life, and then for the last third of their life, they're on the other side. So people inside that context will settle for that, or they'll be like, fuck, working so hard, I'm breaking myself, I'm not enjoying this, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to figure out how to live modestly, and I'm going to downsize, and I'm going to be okay making less money. And so they change their lifestyle and they start to live a very modest life, and then they don't have to work so hard because they're living with less means, and that way, boom, I don't have to work so hard, I've solved it. But it's still inside that exact same context. Right? It's still a function of the belief that if you want a lot of money, you got to work very hard. So you either have to be willing to work harder, or you have to turn down how much money you need. When people start to approach transformation, what people like me are working to support them with first is, what's a goal that's totally outside of this bubble, totally outside of this context. Like a belief or a desire like, I want to make a bunch of money and I don't want to work very hard for it. I want to get paid while I'm not doing anything. That possibility doesn't exist inside the context we've just drawn. Hopefully you can see that. And if you can't, I'm going to ask any of you watching right now to let me know where you got lost so that I can address it. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume we've got it. So if we took someone who was like, all right, Adam, I really want to make a lot of money, but I don't want to work hard. The thing in the way is that belief, which leads to the actions they automatically take, which leads to the world they're surrounded with that reinforces the belief. As long as that structure, that context is still in place, they're going to continually be stymied. They're going to sort of be like, okay, I want to make a bunch of money without working hard. How do I do that? And then they're not going to be able to see anything, because the context we've described is the water they swim in. It's like trying to tell a fish about walking. The fish can't conceive of it. Where they live, there is no land. There's just water, and they move by swimming through it. And so anytime they try to walk, the first thing that's going to be really problematic is they're going to be like, okay, look, oh, I think I'm walking. No, you're swimming weird in water. You're still in water. And so we have to help people break free from the context in order for them to create a result that exists outside of it. So Andrew's question, I had to lay all that out. Andrew's question is like, how do we support people with that? How do we help people do that? And I'll share, I wonder if I can get it here. Let's do it this way. I've got a infographic, is it bit.ly.com? An infographic that sort of details all of this stuff for those of you that are interested. Let's see if I can find it really quick while we're talking here. I don't want to get started for free. I just want to log into Bitly. Stop being dumb, Bitly. Oi, Bitly. There we go. Yeah, I got it. Log me in. I'm pretty sure it's here. We'll log in this way. I don't know if it's working. Let's find out. We'll log in this way. This is a moment of truth, guys. Create a new account. Nope. Okay, we can't get it. I'll post in the comments afterwards, but I've basically created a large infographic that helps you kind of see this and gives you some ways to work through it, because it's kind of it's a bit of a nebulous concept, and it's hard to get our hands around. It's hard to even grasp the idea of water we swim in. We can kind of see that one, but imagine if I told you like everything that we do is stuck inside the idea that we exist in 3 dimensions. So if you want to really create a new result, you're going to have to step into the 4th dimension, or the 5th dimension if we include time. You and I have no idea. We can't even fathom that, right? We could be like, oh, got it. Yeah, that'll be like this. But whatever the this is that we construe in our minds, it's still going to be contained within those 3 dimensions plus time. the three space dimensions in time that we exist in. We can't get our head out of that. So it's very challenging. So I'll post a link to that infographic if you want it so that you've got it. And so to Andrew's question, how do we work with this? How do we support people to see this? So the first thing we do is we we just point to it. We sit with them and we help them like distinguish the beliefs. What are all the beliefs you have about money? What are all the beliefs you have about romantic relationship? What are all the beliefs you have about intimacy? You know, like you can sit with someone and be like, well, it takes at least 4 months before you're really like intimately connected with someone. Notice that that belief precludes being really intimately connected with someone in the first week. It might allow for the possibility that you think you're intimately connected with someone for the first week, but then later on discover that you weren't at all. That can exist, but there's no such thing as like in that first week, really, truly, with your heart and soul, realizing this is the person I want to marry and marrying them. That does not exist as available inside that belief. So first, what are all your beliefs? And then what are all the actions you take as a result of these beliefs? Given that you have to work hard to make money, what have you learned to do in your life? And okay, great. You've got these beliefs, you've got these actions. What's the world around you? What's possible in your life? What is impossible in your life? So that's the first step. That's basically helping fish see the water they're swimming in. The other thing we can do is we can help people start to like notice how they continue to reinforce this for themselves. So having people, once they are aware, oh wow, I've got a belief that you have to work hard to make money, you can sort of let them go and take on noticing that. Okay, great. Go into the world and notice yourself reinforcing this. Notice you gathering evidence for this. Notice you like acting in alignment with this belief. And what that does is it helps people start to see the water they create. It helps them see themselves create the truth of their beliefs. Have a sip and come to a point here. I'm going to read what you said in a sec, Tara. Tara, can you let me know, is it Tara or Tara? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. This has a lot in common with three principles, which is to say our thinking creates our world. That's how our thinking creates our world, is that we have beliefs. The beliefs dictate our actions. The actions create a world around us, and the world around us reinforces our beliefs. I think that three principles gets a little simplistic, where it's just like it's all your thought. That's all there is. Kind of, except the world around you that you've created is actually concrete. And so if we just change our thinking and believe that'll be sufficient, we're going to run headfirst into the world we've created around us. So what there is to do is to be a little conscious of that. Oh, there is a concreteness that I've created to my thinking. My thinking is expressed concretely in the world around me. I'm going to have to do some work to it, to work with that, to change that, to integrate that. So we can help people see, we can just give them the practice. Take on noticing this. Notice how this shows up for you. And we can invite people to notice like, hey, Tara, okay, I'm going to assume Tara. Tara said you got it right. Thanks for checking in. But I asked, is it Tara or Tara? I think it's Tara then. I'm just going to assume that. So we can also have people like notice, hey, is it working out for you? How is it going operating based on the belief that you have to work hard to make money? And another thing we can do is invite people to notice, just notice that it is a belief. Go into the world and notice people that have a different belief and notice them living from that belief. So you can start to just see, you can separate this idea in your brain that this is truth and start to see, oh, it's a belief I have. And what that does is it gives us just a little bit of movement, a little bit of space or fluidity. We can kind of have a little bit more room to change. Because if something is the quote unquote truth, we're effed, right? There's nothing we can do about it. The best thing you can do is like, I guess I'll just learn to be okay lying to people for a few years so I can make a bunch of money without working hard. That sucks. There's something I want to reference here. Bear with me. I can't remember what it is. It'll come back to me. Tara's saying, this is a little bit like being on a pendulum. We can swing to the opposite side, but we're still inside the same context. That's exactly right. I can make a lot of money working hard, or I can be okay not making a lot of money not working hard. This is the thing I take issue with, or maybe a better way to put it is like part of what's problematic with a lot of the leadership advice in the world. A lot of the books on coaching and leadership, a lot of the training in coaching ultimately moves people from one side of their context to the other side. And then people kind of settle for that. The classic one that often gets quoted is Robin Sharma's book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, about this guy who um, was working himself to death and was so blah 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 blah, and then sold that all and gave it all up, and then lived this beautiful life. But he's operating inside the same context. He's just gone to the other side and learned to empower that. And those changes are not really the transformation that we want. They're just change. They're like rearranging furniture in your apartment. You're still in the same apartment. It looks different. It's nice. It's not bad, but it's not the whole scale transformation that we really want. It's what we tend to settle for. Settle for that change. So that's what I would say, Andrew, is really giving, those are the sort of practices I would invite. Let's go to another topic. So Phil Goddard, my friend Phil, says, he asked as a suggestion, can you talk about training events that were so bad we learned more from them than they had lived up to? He basically saying, talk about training events that were bad and where we learned more from them than really kind of we expected. Or can you talk at him about bad training events and how you take stuff away from it and that sort of thing. I think he's referencing the place we met, which was an event that wasn't necessarily the best event. So I'll talk about that in a general sense. So transformation in the world, first of all, is a rare jewel. It is not a common thing. In fact, it's hard to find. There's a lot of stuff masquerading as transformation because what we settle for is that change that I've just described, going from one end of the spectrum to the other. And what is safe and drives up less of our resistance is, hey, Mia, nice to see you. What is safe for us is learning and getting educated and gathering information. I think I have yogurt on my mustache there. Gathering information is really comforting and safe. And so that's what most of us settle for. Transformational work is confronting, and when we're confronted, we become resistant. And when we're resistant, we kind of lock ourselves into where we are, and we get frustrated, and the trainer gets frustrated, and then things start to get messy, and then we either quit or we attack the trainer energetically, or we just suffer through it. We're like, fine, I'm not going to get anything. So most events aren't transformational in nature. Most coaches aren't transformational in nature. Most leaders aren't transformational in nature. It is rarity. It requires continual input and energy brought into a system to have it maintain transformation. This is why I believe it's really important for coaches to continue working with their coaches if they're going to claim that they're committed to being transformational. If they're not making that claim, no problem at all. No worries. But if they really want to be transformational in what they do with people, I think it's really important for them to keep taking on their own work so they can stay in a state of transformation. So the offshoot of that is that most of the events I go to, most of the events you probably go to, aren't really going to be transformational. And that can be disappointing when we go there expecting transformation. And what tends to happen at these events is you go and one, you might just want information. Sometimes that can be satisfying. Sweet, I'm getting some information. In the coaching realm, what kind of happens is you can get something that's I'm trying to think of a good way to describe this. It's a little bit like if you were to go talk to the leader or your coach and be like, hey, I'm really frustrated because I'm hoping to get this here and I noticed that's not happening. And I feel kind of bored and this isn't very challenging. What happens in an event where the leader is not particularly transformed themselves, but has a bit of coaching kind of training maybe in their background, is you often get questions like you get this back. You get, how are you creating that? Oh, how are you making this boring? How are you showing up? That blah 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 blah. So what happens is everything we bring forward comes back to us is well, how are you making that? How are you the creator of that? So That can be great. That can be a good question now and then. But what I want to point to is that in that the leader does not take any responsibility, right? It's sort of like it always comes back to you. Oh, got it. How am I creating that? And so what happens is that we're left in this kind of state where it's like, oh, I guess whatever's showing up, I need to just take a look at on my side of the fence. That can be like a good thing, sort of, but it can also get a little bit like if all there ever is for me to show up, have the experience I'm having, and then ask myself, how am I creating that experience? That's great. I can gain some work from that. I can do work with that, right? I can be like, okay, got it. Where else in my life do I create an experience of boredom? I'm going to take a look there. Okay, whoa, blah. Can do that. But what happens in these situations is eventually people kind of reach the conclusion they're like, I can pretty much fucking do this myself. I don't have a shortage of events I'm going to where I feel bored. And for all of those events, I can just be like, all right, how am I creating the experience of boredom? And I can keep doing my own work. And so what's happening in these, these exchanges, these events that are being led by people with a little, like some coach training, but not a lot of transformation, is that they ask a question that has the look and feel of like transformational coaching, but actually does not really support it. And so what happens is people are they go, they get this, they kind of like jazzed up at first, eventually they start to be a little bit disillusioned. They start to try to share this, and nothing they share ever has an impact over there. It always comes back to them. And then where they're left is like, all right, well, I guess I can just get this anywhere. I'm not really getting that much here. And the heart and soul of what's happening here is that the leader or the coach that is doing this happens in organizations too, the leader or the coach is actually untouchable. They are not willing to really let that person impact them. They're not really to take that on themselves. And so the person bringing the complaint, we'll call it, never really gets to see modeled what it would look like for someone to really take a look on their side of the fence and say, how am I creating this? So the question, the way that could go, where it's really transformational, is that the participant comes to the coach or the leader and says, yo, I'm kind of bored and I'm frustrated. And the leader or coach goes, shit, there's some stuff showing up for me. First, that hurts. That doesn't feel good. Let me sit with that and just honor that that's showing up. Second, man, how am I creating for this person an experience of being bored? How am I creating for this person an experience of being frustrated? What can I own in this moment? What can I see? And what that does is it actually models for the person that's come to them. It models for them what it looks like to look on our side of the fence. Instead, what ends up happening is you go to the leader, you ask them that question, and they kind of they're doing an effective version of telling you, look on your side of the fence, without them really modeling it for you. And this goes a little bit to Tibby's question, which is, Adam, you mentioned children don't notice what we say or what we do, they notice who we're being. And it's not just children. This is what we learn from people. We learn not from what they tell us to do. This is why advice never works, unless you're giving it to yourself in the moment. And we also don't learn from what they do. We learn from how they're being. And so what happens at these events is that people go to these leaders, ostensibly these coach training events, and they bring this sort of stuff, and the leader turns it back to them. And then they're like, okay, I'll be a good student, blah, 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 blah. And over time, they conclude, I can pretty much do this by myself. And then they go and start to do the same thing to other people. They start to be the kind of coach where their client kind of shows up and is like, hey, I got to be honest, I'm getting kind of bored. I'm not really, sure what to do with it, blah, blah, blah. And the person's like, great, how can you see, blah, 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 blah. And what happens is you have a whole bunch of people basically inviting people to be a certain way without being that same way themselves, without willing to model it in the moment. You might say, well, Adam, maybe they're being a good leader. They're sort of being powerful for that person in that moment, and then they go away and think about it by themselves. That's not really that's not the good leadership you think it is. That's going and practicing leadership in the safety of your studio rather than practicing it right here in the moment. Leadership is developed and modeled here in the moment in front of people. And so that's how it goes. And so you get this is a very common thing in a lot of these events, and it's not being done because that leader is malicious. It's not being done because that leader is lazy or thinks themselves better than you or something like that. It's being done because that leader is not engaged in their own transformational support. And they really feel, they really believe, oh, I'm really supporting this person, but they're not, because they're not having someone really support them. And this is why until we've walked through those fiery coals ourselves, we can't really support other people to walk through them. At best, we kind of do this thing where we halfway do it. We invite them to walk through the coals themselves, but we don't walk through them. And so it kind of perpetuates itself, goes further and further and further forward. So these events are common. This is the majority of what most events, even purporting to be transformational, provide. And it's part of the reason I'm so passionate about transformation. It's part of the reason Bay and I run the Forge. It's part of the reason I coach leaders and do things that I do in the world, is because I want to support people to become truly transformational rather than the facsimile that we've been talking about here at these events, so that people can go to the events and really experience themselves as a different human being, rather than being simply inspired about the human being they are currently being. Let's see what you guys have written here. Tom, you say, one of the things I love about attending Rich Lippman's events is a question he always asks at the beginning: what do you need to do or be to get your money's worth, even if the event doesn't happen before you even get here? So that's a great example of the thing I'm talking about. So it's a great question, right? As a starting point, because it invites us, hey, let's check in, like, what is there for me to take on? But my experience with a lot of those events is that it stays at that question. What do you need to be doing right now? You're experiencing this as boring. What do you need to be doing to change this? And that question can be really powerful. Every question can be powerful, but we want to get to the being behind it. And what I experience about that question at those events is it's a little Teflon-y. It allows the work always to be over there with you, as opposed to like, hey, who do I need to be? And what I would really love to hear at those events would be for him or the leader asking that question to be the one to answer that first, and not to have a pre-created answer that sounds really awesome, but to really sit and struggle with it in the moment, to model that for everyone in that room so they can see what it looks like to ask that question and to answer it. Who would I need to be so that everyone at this event got their value no matter what? That, for me, would be a step past change into something truly transformational. Andrew says, well, this conversation has given me a place to reflect on my responsibility in a coaching relationship. Thanks for bringing this topic, Phil. Yeah, thank you, Phil. Mia says, it's a great way to show up with our children. Kind of showing our work is really useful, which it absolutely is. She's saying it's effing challenging, which I agree with. If leadership wasn't challenging, it would be as common as it purports to be on LinkedIn. We would see it. It would be as common and frequent as there are articles telling you how to be a good leader. And the funny thing about leadership, hey Alexandra, it's nice to see you. Good evening. The funny thing about leadership is there is as many articles on LinkedIn that are purporting to help you with leadership as there are articles throughout the world of people complaining about bad leadership. It's like, yo, these two things seem correlated. You'd think if there was this many articles on how to be a good leader, maybe we wouldn't see so many about people being bad leaders. And Mia says, I think the heart of the matter, right? It's so much easier if the work is over there with the other person, my son, my boss, my friend, my client, my coworker, my colleague, my leader. Absolutely. People, myself included, we don't want to look on our side. I was working with a client yesterday, an amazing man who's up to all kinds of beautiful, incredible stuff. And we were looking at this interaction that was going on for him, and a client had gotten really upset with how things had gone. And I was asking him, what do you see you can be responsible for? And as we were looking through this, he sort of paused and he was like, you know what, I'm really stuck on, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't want, like, I shouldn't have to be responsible for anything. I didn't do anything wrong. And so he's got first blame and responsibility collapsed, conflated with each other, but that's part of like the world we live in. It's hard for us to take responsibility because it's so wrapped up in doing wrong. And and this is someone like committed to leadership. They've engaged in this kind of support. They work with me, right? They're up to it. They're here for the conversation, and they're acknowledging their humanity in that moment. It's hard to let go of this stuff. And so those questions, right? Who would you need to have this be the most powerful event ever? It's great until it becomes only the question and only the place and always the lens through which we look, at which point it's like, ah, crap, it's always over there. How do you need to change how you're being? Hey, Andrea, it's nice to see you. Andrea writes, it's so easy to read it and feel like we know it cognitively, leadership, this sort of stuff, but the execution is so much messier and is never as black and white as the words on those pages. Yeah, one of my teachers said the edge only exists in the moment. Our edge, wherever our edge lies, only exists in the moment. Talking about it in the future is irrelevant, and talking about what you did yesterday is not you being on your edge. The edge is always in the moment. And for me, that's a beautiful reminder, moment by moment, like, oh, right, let go of the past. Let go of how many times I've done this. Let go of the fact that I'm better than I was yesterday. Let go of what I'm going to do tomorrow, and let go of all the aspirations I have for the next 3 years. The edge is right here, Adam, for you to step on. Get on it. That's my invitation for me. You guys can take it on too if you like. Oh, I should talk about the trap of the obvious shoulds. What time is it? Oh yeah, nice. We're crushing it for time. And then I'll talk about providing feedback. Providing feedback, I'm gonna share with you a bit from this book. Look at that. There's a section on how to provide feedback. I'm giving leaders how-tos. The third section of this book has a whole bunch of like how-tos, how to provide feedback. What else does it have? How to get present to your impact, how to create and use structure, a whole bunch of stuff. So I'll talk about that too. So let's talk about obvious shoulds. I wrote a post about this yesterday and it got zero traction, none whatsoever. So I'm talking about it now. There will be traction. This is like um, this is a conversation not about the obvious shoulds themselves. It's about the context of an obvious should. I'm going to make that make sense in a sec. An obvious should is something that we obviously should do. Obviously, we should work to resolve inequality. Obviously, we should work to resolve climate change. Obviously, we should work to end homelessness. Obviously, we should work to create a more diverse workplace, so on and so forth. These are obvious. They are obvious shoulds. Obviously, we should do X, Y, or Z to resolve this problem. So those problems themselves, those things, right? Climate change, diversity, I'm in no way in this conversation saying that those are bad things or that we shouldn't put our attention there. So if, as I start to broaden out the scope of what I'm going to talk about, you start to have a sense like, hey, hang on, but we really should be working on those things, I agree. So that's the foundation for this conversation. What I'm going to talk about is the consequence of what happens when obviously we should do something. So obviously we should do something as a context. It's like a way in which we are holding certain things. When we look to things like obvious shoulds, what happens is we get very wrapped around it. We become righteous and kind of like there's fury around it and like this must be addressed. There's not a lot of room for a conversation about whether or not we should do something about it. Climate change, motherfuckers. We got to change this. Look at the world. The rivers are drying up. Places becoming a furnace. And in like 5 years, it's crazy. Obviously, we should do something about it. So when we start to hold something as an obvious should, what happens is that we lose the capacity to be with people that are not yet on board with us. They become very frustrating. We get annoyed and we lack patience and the ability to sit with them. And what happens there is one of two things. We dehumanize them. They're a moron. The problem is that they're stupid. So we just got to step over them. We try to clamber over top of them. Or we bring the full weight of our sort of righteous fury that this must be done to them, and they come along with us because they feel that. They feel that heat. Obviously, we should do this. They got on board and hold it like an obvious should as well. What happens when we engage in like this kind of work, when we get people to do stuff because obviously we should, is that people come along with us from an intellectual place or from a reactive place. So the intellectual place is, yeah, obviously we should do something about climate change. Let's do it. And then we start to try to affect solution. Obviously, we should do something about the lack of diversity in our workplace, so we should do something about it. And then we engage in some kind of solution. Or we do it from like that defensive place, which is like, it's a real problem here. We must resolve this. So we're resolving it not from like a place that's like, man, what good would come of us addressing this? We resolve it from a place of, this is really bad, so we have to change it. So ultimately what's happening, what's lacking in both of these approaches is genuine enrollment. This is the same as if you try to lose weight from a place of like, I'm fat and I don't like that and I should eat healthier. Obviously, you should eat healthier, right? That becomes an intellectual concept. I should do this thing. I better get started. And so when we approach solutions, when we take on actions from that place, what happens is there's no genuine enrollment. There's no sort of like enrollment of the nature where it's like, here's the benefit that would come out of us really taking this on. What's the genuine, is that the word? No, there's a different word and I can't think of what it is. But like, what really would happen to benefit us today if we were to start to move our company towards one that is climate centric? What is the immediate benefit? I'm not talking about like the world would be better for people 80 years down the road. That is way too conceptual. That's an intellectual thing. I'm not saying that that's not a benefit, right? Of course it is. But that's not something that we can hold in our hearts today. It's not something we can connect with today. It's something that can exist up here in our mind. I can intellectually understand that, but I can't feel that way today. What's the benefit of bringing on a more diverse workforce? Well, there'd be freedom for all. Everyone would have equality. Great. That's a great thing, but that exists intellectually. It's hard to have people make investments from that place. And the trouble with an obvious should is as soon as we start to engage in the conversation I'm inviting, which is, but why? Right? Inviting us to really stop and say, but why are we doing this? And not ask that question from, but why? Therefore, we won't do it. I mean, ask that question and actually sit with it. But why? What would be the benefit today of hiring one more BIPOC, for example? What would be the benefit today of installing 10 solar panels on our roof? What would that provide us that would benefit us right now? What is that going to change in terms of the way our employees feel today? And what's the benefit of them feeling that way today going to be on our bottom line? This is genuine enrollment. This is where we start to get like, oh shit, this isn't some lofty aspiration that we should do. This isn't some intellectual thing that would benefit us. If we take this on, there's going to be real world benefit now. And that's actually going to benefit our investors now. When we slow down and sit in that kind of conversation and start to really work with the tough question to sit with, but why? And set aside our defensiveness. They're asking me why. They should just know. Obviously, we should have a more diverse and better climate change. I wish I had more like right-wing kind of issues, but I'm very lefty, so I can only steel man the other side, the stuff, the arguments on the other side. But like when we slow down and really sit in that challenging question of, but why? What will really benefit us from this? What will happen to us today? That's where we can start to come on board with something from our hearts, from a place where we really see this is not just like a diversity and inclusion. This is not just a greenwashing our company. This is really going to benefit us right now. That's how we bring people on board. What tends to be happening, what I notice is happening in a lot of the world is change is happening, change, not transformation. Change is happening because people get onto the obvious should. And again, I want to reiterate, that's a noble thing. It's great that they're like, this is important. But then they aren't really enrolled in themselves. They haven't sat down with the but why. They haven't built this out for themselves. They don't have the patience for it. They're so furious. There's so much righteousness. Fuck you and your what for? Now, we should do this now. This should already have been done. It's wrong that it's here. And that I believe is what is leading to a lot of the things we're seeing in the world where it comes to like how climate change is a lot of just greenwashing. You know, carbon credits get created, but the companies, they just trade them around and it doesn't make any difference because the company doesn't actually believe in the benefits of becoming climate focused. what they're doing is intellectually meeting that goal of climate change. And so they buy carbon credits and they can sell it to people and blah, blah, blah. But they're not actually asking the question, what's the benefit that would happen if we truly were carbon neutral? Not fake carbon neutral, but like genuine carbon neutral. How would that benefit us? How could we enroll in our, how could we enroll our investors in getting them on board for that? Or how could we, what would we gain from like a more diverse workforce? What would genuinely happen? And if you can slow down and sit with those sort of questions, that is what starts to create genuine inclusivity, as opposed to, look, we've hired 3 people of color. Now we have the rainbow gang. Like there's this nice United Colors of Benetton kind of thing at our business. Look, we did what you asked us to do. Now let's get back to making profits the way we made profits. That doesn't create actual inclusion. What it does is it creates an intellectual checking of the boxes kind of thing. And so the context that I want to invite all of us to notice and to kind of work with these days is noticing our obvious shoulds. I'm inviting all of us. This is what I'm taking on. You're free to join me. But I'm starting to look for, like, what are my obvious shoulds? The things, obviously I should do this. The things I put on other people that obviously they should do this. Obvious shoulds. If we start to look down that path, then we'll start to notice the places where what's called for and what's missing is enrollment. And then we can start to go, can I enroll myself? Can I slow down from my neediness, my insistence this should just happen? And can I stop and start to ask, what's in it for me if it did? Really, what's in it for me if I did? Not high-level intellectual concepts, but like in my heart, today, what would benefit me if I started to move down this path? And then from there, we can sit with other people and slow down with them, and we can listen to their objections, and then we can invite them to notice, here's what might be available. If people really understood the real world, tangible, today benefits that would come from sitting in things like climatizing your business so that it is like carbon neutral or whatever, they would jump on board that. The trouble is that we're not taking the time to do that. We're so reactive, there's no real enrollment. And without real enrollment, people will only do what is required in order to not feel the guilt of not doing what we say is required. And that, that gets us where we are. Look, I'm doing my carbon credit thing. I've got all carbon credits. Now let's push this cruise boat through the ocean. It doesn't work. All right, last one. The illusion of inclusion. I like that, Mia. That's a good TED Talk right there. Let's talk about providing feedback. So this is from Who Do You Think You Are? The book being released, launched September 12th. I'm told it's amazing by a few people. All of them are me, and they're all right. They're some of the smartest people I know. So the thing I'm going to share here is like kind of a bit of like the starting point to providing feedback, and a place that a lot of leaders are really oblivious. So if you ask people, how are you providing and receiving feedback? You'll get a myriad of answers. Some people are like, I really don't like it. Some people are like, I'm really good. Some people will be like, oh, considering, I love that one. Considering, whenever you ask a question and someone says, considering X, Y, and Z, it's sort of like, oh, we're starting with you justifying what you're about to tell me instead of you just telling me. That's so interesting. As a side, someone on LinkedIn sent me a marketing message. They kind of were like, hey, it's super great to be connected with you. And then sure enough, the pitch followed shortly after. And I was like, no, I'm a no thank you to your offer. By the way, how's your heart? That's that question. And their response was like, considering this, considering that, considering I have all of these clients, considering blah, my heart is very full. Why did you ask this question? And I was like, so right, starting off with the justification. My heart's full. Thank you. Feels how does my heart? Right now it feels warm and loved. I feel loved. It's a nice feeling. So most leaders will look to their experience providing feedback, how it's gone, all of that sort of stuff. Before we can really become masterful in the art of providing feedback, we need to do something that I rarely see people having done, and that is get clear on our relationship to feedback. What do I make it mean to provide feedback to someone? When I am providing feedback to someone, what does that mean? And when I am receiving feedback, what does that mean? What is my belief about that? So here's some examples, right? If I'm providing feedback to someone, it means they fucked up. If I am receiving feedback, it means I screwed up. If I am providing feedback to someone, it means they want a raise from me. If I'm receiving, there's there's a billion different beliefs, contexts we can have around feedback. Very rarely, if ever, do I see leaders actually stop and take stock of this question. What do I actually make it mean that I'm providing feedback? And so the first thing is if we don't stop and get clear on our context, our beliefs around feedback, it's sort of like we're not even going to be aware of how that's going to color the energy that we transmit as we receive or give feedback. If I have a belief that giving feedback to people means they fucked up, I can do everything in the world to try to like address that story about what it is to give feedback, but underneath that is still going to be the energy of you fucked up. So I could try to be like really nice and soft, and like I could try to give them 13 nice compliments. I can, I have a little flow chart where I'm like, compliment one, done, compliment two. And the energy underneath all of that is like, you fucked up. And so you end up with leaders that are like, yeah, I have a great system for providing feedback. I give 5 compliments. I make sure they really know that I love them. And then I tell them the thing. And it's like, again, they're pointing to what they're doing, but they're oblivious to who they're being. Imagine being told of how you're awesome 5 times in a row when the energy underneath that is you fucked up. How are those compliments going to land for you? What is that going to feel like? Probably pretty terrible, right? Probably like you know a beating is coming, but the person's fluffing you beforehand. You're kind of like, fuck, get over with this. I know I fucked up. Can you get to the point? It's actually going to make it worse, right? And the compliments are going to land shallowly. So often what leaders do when they're engaged in like feedback is they look to the solution, the system, the algorithm, the blah, without actually taking a stock of the beliefs they have, the context they have around feedback. I'm going to read what you've written here, Mia. Mia says, when my son provides me with feedback, one of the things I make it mean is I raised a powerful young man and he trusts himself and me enough to share his feedback. That's a beautiful context for feedback. What about when someone other than your son, Mia, says, are you open to feedback? What shows up for you? What is it like when you have to give someone feedback? Do you give people feedback? So another thing that's kind of interesting about that is sometimes you'll have people be like, oh, when I provide feedback to people, that means that I'm letting them know they've done a good job. Great. What about when you're receiving feedback? Oh, it means that I fucked up. Those disconnects are fascinating because it tells us like that's weird, right? That someone giving something would hold that it means one thing, but then if someone else is giving it to them, it means a totally different thing. And anytime there's that disconnect, the wires sort of being crossed, that's going to come across, the energy you transmit as a leader is going to be confusing. People are going to be like, oh, this is weird. Like they're telling me one thing, but then at the same time, I feel like there's this other thing. And that's how our being is so important. It's so determinative of the impact of our leadership. And it leaves people very perplexed. Very rarely do people have a nerd like me saying this stuff. We don't really think about it to this extent. Instead, we just feel it. We feel it as like this vague experience of unease when Rob, the leader, is talking to us. We don't have it distinguished. We don't understand why this is or what's going on. We're just like, I don't know, but I feel awkward and like I'm holding my breath as he's speaking to me. This is strange. And what's kind of interesting is when I sit in groups of leaders, leadership groups, executive councils, that sort of stuff, and support them with this, their staff often have an experience of like, oh my God, that's totally how I feel. This makes so much sense. Because now we're putting like an actual distinguished experience to the vague feeling they've had. And they're like, oh, no wonder. Yeah, I do. I feel like I'm about to get hit with the head with a shoe. But before that, I'm being told I'm super awesome. And it's even worse because then I want to relax. But if I do, I know I'm going to get belt with a shoe and then, so I can't. And it's very awkward. So this is one of the most powerful things that we can do when we want to become masterful at giving feedback is learn to get clear on our stories about it. And one of the first things that's in the way of getting clear on our stories about it is our stories about what our stories should be. So the way that sounds is if I sit down with someone and I say, what's your relationship to feedback? oh, it's like a good thing and it's important to do every 9 months and it makes us all better. Great. All right. We got that answer out of the way. Now, when someone says, I want to give you feedback, how do you feel in your gut? Right? So we start trying to answer this question from our head, and we often begin with sort of like this nice, fluffy leadership speak, management speak, kind of like, it's a good thing, blah, 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 blah. So it's okay to have that, but then we really want to get to like, what do you feel in your balls or your vagina or like your guts? What do your viscera feel when someone says, I have feedback? And when you are giving someone feedback, what do you feel viscerally? That tells us a lot more of the truth of your relationship to feedback than the nice sort of management management speak that we tend to start with. Mia says, when Adam gives me feedback, I make it mean that he loves me and that I'm wrong and I have stuff to learn and I'm an artist and I have more to do. I'm wrong, right? I'm wrong. So that's not to make Mia wrong for this, right? Mia's distinguishing something here. She can see, oh, I make it mean I'm wrong. And so now imagine Mia's engaged in a leadership practice with Bay and I in the Forge. As she gives other people feedback, which is part of her job, part of what's going to come through is you're wrong. I don't want you to feel wrong. However, if Mia can take on the work to change that context, to create a new way of relating to feedback, then she can transmit feedback to people from a place where it's not wrong. And by the way, Bay and I's job is also to take a look on our side and say, who are we being? How are we showing up that might be conveying or giving Mia this experience of her being wrong? Are we conscious of that? Is there a possibility that's showing up? This is how leadership's always both sides of the tracks, right? We're not just saying, how are you creating that? We're always taking a look on our side. Andrea says, my listening is always, what did I do wrong and how do I fix it? Keeping that present when I respond is a constant challenge. The idea of keeping it in mind when I'm giving feedback is powerful. We have another member of our leadership team who's just done beautiful, beautiful work. And one thing that was really interesting for her was feedback, kind of like Mia's described, meant like I've done something wrong. And so her reaction to that was the moment she'd get feedback, she'd sort of like instantly, in the moment, you could almost see it, her mind would run off and she would like craft a solution. All right, I did it. I'm not fucking up anymore. I was fucking up. You gave me the feedback, but now it's resolved. And it was like very fast. And what it did was it had her kind of like, almost like if you drive over a bunch of speed bumps, you kind of just hit the first and the last one. Like she skipped over all of the actual work that was there because she couldn't just sit in the feedback. Her relationship to the feedback made it impossible for her to sit in it. Because of her relationship to the feedback, I'm fucking up and I should change this, she then had a reactive action. I need to fix this immediately. And she'd do that. And that stopped her from actually like settling down into the feedback. So we want as leaders to notice our belief about feedback, both giving and receiving, and then to notice the reactions, the reactive action we take as a result of that. And often what there is to do, once we can start to see both of those in the moment, is just fucking breathe. Get the feedback and breathe with it. Can I take a deep breath and can I remind my nervous system that I'm not under attack? And can I, like, the deep breath tells our nervous system, hey, we're all good. Nothing we have to defend against. And as we slow our body down, the mind will follow. And then we can start to sit with the feedback in a much more powerful way, or we can give the feedback in a much more powerful way. It's pretty fascinating stuff, if I do say so myself. Most leaders don't engage in this kind of conversation. Instead, they find the 10 steps. Here's how you give feedback. Tell someone they're nice. Compliment their tie. Say that they've done good work 6 months in the past. Think of a time when you liked them. Sandwich in the shit thing that they've done. Say a nice thing, say a nice thing, say a nice thing. I'm not saying acknowledgement isn't important. I'm addressing the being underneath it. That's what matters most. Andrew, you say, one of the things I'm sitting with right meow is that in structured settings where I know I'll receive feedback, I'm good with it. So when there's a container, you're going to get feedback here. But getting feedback in the moment that is unexpected, say from my wife, well, I have resistance to that. Mm-hmm. What's your story about getting feedback from your wife in the moment, Andrew, if you're willing to take a look? What do I make it mean when I get feedback? I notice for myself, I have really similar, like when people say, are you open to feedback? My immediate reaction is like, I fucked up. So, I've got it too. And that context will probably be there forever to some extent. Like our fears get created at a very young age and they are with us. The leader's job is not to eradicate something once and forever. I don't think that's a very healthy context or idea to carry forward. The leader's job is to become conscious. I'm talking about leader as a human being wherever you are in your life, not leader in a hierarchy. So leader, if we want to be committed to leadership, our job is to be conscious of this stuff. So I can notice, oh, there's that part of me that's like, you fucked up, Adam. And here's that part of me that's like, say yes automatically so you can then hear how you fucked up and then resolve it. All right, that's all showing up. It's all coming online. My job's to breathe here, take a breath. Okay, first question I ask myself, am I actually in a state or a space where it's going to serve me to receive feedback? Am I open to it? Never mind, I think I should. That's that old training. Am I actually like able to metabolize some feedback in this moment? No. Can you tell me tomorrow? I'd love to hear what you have. I just noticed I'm a little energized, innervated in this moment, and so maybe now's not the right time. Second question, is it actually going to serve this person to give me feedback in this moment? And where I'm looking there is, if I've just given someone feedback, it's a really common human thing for us to be like, thank you for your feedback. Are you open to feedback? Sort of like, thanks for shooting the ball over here. Let me crack it back at your forehead. That's not a time that's going to serve that person or me to receive feedback. And so in those moments, once I'm settled, I'm like, yeah, I actually could receive feedback right now. But actually, I think what would really serve in this moment is to have this person hold on to it. I really would like to hear it. But since I've just given you feedback, would you be willing to let that sit so that, we're not jumping over it to help me somehow so that you can really be with the feedback I've gotten? Those are kind of places I like to look. Always, though, first and foremost, here. And this is a hurdle for a lot of people when they start into the conversation of leadership, is that they hold feedback like I must take it on, and if I don't, I'm a bad leader. Nope. It's really important that we check. Am I actually open to receiving feedback? That's part of leadership. Part of leadership is us checking in like, do I have the capacity right now for this? And it's not to say that there are times when there's always times when we have to stretch beyond our capacity. That's the nature of leadership, right? If I go to the gym and lift the same weight of weights every time, I'm going to reach a level of strength and then I'm not going to bypass that. So I have to up my capacity. I have to push my capacity. So we want to make sure we're not always using our capacity as an excuse and just always staying where we are. That's what your leader will support you in doing, is to find the stretch point. Ah, it actually seems like you said yes, but I don't really feel like you are open to. It feels like what would really serve you right now is just to 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 be a no. Ah, thank you. Yeah, that's true. Usually the way we discover this is we ask people, are you open to some feedback? Are you able to receive some? And they say yes. And we're like, okay, I don't know if that's true, but we have to let them learn this for themselves. We give the feedback, and then their energy is, fuck you. Fuck you, that's not the case. Blah, 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 defensiveness, whatever, shut down, whatever it is. And then we say, it seems like there's a lot of defensiveness over there, and like you're kind of upset. Well, yeah, you said that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. So it seems like maybe you actually weren't open to feedback. Well, maybe, I guess maybe not. Great. Okay, great. So let's just take this off the table for now. That's how people develop their leadership, is by learning the thing for themselves, by taking that swing themselves. So it's kind of funny, right? Because as we're developing someone's leadership, they might kind of hold it like, well, you should just know. You should have felt that I wasn't open to leadership in that moment. I did. But you wouldn't have learned for yourself that you weren't open for leadership in that moment unless I trusted you. That's why I asked you and let you answer and then trusted and honored your answer, was so you could discover this for yourself. And it sucks because in doing so, sometimes we occur like the bad guys. Sometimes we occur heartless, as though like, fuck, jerk, you should have felt that. I did. And I was willing to let this mess get created because this was how you were going to develop this ability to feel into this for yourself. Leadership's a crazy business, crazy thing to do. Let's see if there's anything I've missed that I wanted to talk about. Oh, you guys have written some stuff that I really want to read. Richard, it's nice to see you, brother. If you guys aren't following Richard, I recommend you do. He is a guy speaking and promoting and bringing leadership to firemen and fire crew around all of the US. He's an incredibly inspiring guy. Richard and I were in ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony together, and just followed his journey. He's such an inspiring man. So follow along with him if you're not. Um, Mia, you say, in relationships where I feel deeply loved, I find it easier to let in. For example, with my sons, with Chris, my manager, and with you and Bay. I'm glad Mia said you and Bay instead of just Bay. But Mia brings a really good point, which is our leadership can only be as powerful as we are able to be open-hearted and loving. The amount to which someone feels loved by you is the amount to which they can receive the potency of your leadership. If someone doesn't feel very loved by you, then you can be as powerful as you want, but they're only going to be able to let that much in. And then it's sort of like trying to fill a cup with a fire hose. It just blasts out. It doesn't actually fill the cup. And so leadership is actually equal parts and a constant dance between love and rigor. We're always moving back and forth between those. It's an art. We're finding it's sort of a yin yang kind of thing, and many other metaphors. I don't have to keep giving you metaphors. So thanks for speaking to that, Mia. Andrew says, what do you say, Andrew? He says, haha, I'm sure there are many places to look. I think at times when my wife says I've done something wrong, I've made her angry, I don't want to be with that, or I've heard it before. In the moments where I'm patient and connected, I'll be much more willing to be with that in the moment of feedback. But Andrew, what I want to know is when your wife says, are you open to feedback? I want to know what the story is in that moment before she says anything. When she catches you off guard and says, can I give you some feedback? Or I've got feedback for you, or and or however it starts, I want to know right in that moment what's the story, because that tells us your relationship to feedback in general. Alexandra says, hi, I'm going to remember actually considering if I can receive feedback in the moment. It's hilarious to think I never gave myself the option to say no, not right now. That's an ironic part about, a counterintuitive part about what it is to become more responsible, is learning to be responsible for when we are unwilling to be responsible. Let me say it again, learning to be responsible for when we are not willing to be responsible. So in the early days of leadership, and because most leadership's not really transformational or particularly well developed, the game just becomes you should always be open. But if you think about that, why? Why? I'm a human. I get shitty sometimes. Sometimes I drive in traffic and the person in front of me is going too slow. I should just be open there? Why? The sun doesn't always shine. A hermit crab's not always out of its shell. Why should I always be open? If that was the case, why would I ever have learned to develop armor? So that's nonsense. But we hold it. As soon as we get into a leadership conversation, we're like, I should always be open. That's what it is to be responsible. And this has been a lot of my journey in the last probably year and a half, has been learning to be responsible for what's inside rather than responsible as a leader, which is sort of something a little bit more external. Hey, do I have the capacity right now? What is my heart saying in this moment? It's saying, fuck you. Okay, got it. Not the time for me to try to step further into my leadership. Time for me to nurture that fuck you. Let that exist a little bit before I start to open back up. So that's a funny challenge of leadership because it's so counterintuitive. Richard's saying, as a leader in critical life and death situations, I have found feedback should be separated into the primary and secondary goals. Primary is work, the moment, the present, no ego, no pain body stories, just the right now. Secondary goal is to solve or address the problem and make progress by working in the moment, no future, no past. That's an interesting distinction, Richard. I'm not totally sure how that fits into our conversation about who someone's being underneath feedback. What I would say is whether you're providing primary or secondary feedback, underneath that will exist your relationship to feedback in general. And you could probably go even further and be like, what's my relationship to giving primary feedback? What is my relationship to receiving primary feedback? What is my relationship to giving secondary feedback and receiving? And so the beautiful thing, I think, in that is that our being pervades everything. It's ubiquitous. It's always everything we do, whether it's like I give blue, red, and green feedback, or primary, secondary, or laser and quantum and ninja feedback. Underneath that is our being, always. And so by looking to the being, there is always richness for us to uncover, which I think is so cool. I think that's super cool. Andrea says, Alexandra, thanks for the reflection. I can see my never giving myself the option to not receive feedback that I think I'm giving to others. And Alexandra says, something for both of us to do. Hell yes. Cool. Feedback is like, that is an advanced form of practice. Bay and I have a sacred yoga practice, the yoga of intimacy. And that means sitting down every morning, most mornings at least, gazing into each other's eyes, and then working with a particular yogic practice, an asana, if you like. So sometimes that might mean me saying I see and sharing what I see, and her saying I feel. Sometimes it might mean her giving me feedback. Here's what I would need to trust you more as a man, Adam. And then me offering feedback. Here's what I would need to feel more of the fullness of your heart as a woman, Bay. There's a whole bunch of different asanas, different yogic practices that we sit in together. And the hilarious thing is like, some days she'll be like, what I would need to trust you as a man is for you to have a smile on your face. And I'm like, fuck you, I'm smiling, whatever, fuck. It's just like shit. It's such a benign piece of feedback. And I got all this stuff that shows up around it. And so it's almost like awe-inspiring, if we can hold it in this context, it's awe-inspiring how much significance we can place around feedback. And from there, I believe we can really have a lot of space, like a lot of compassion for ourselves when we're working with this thing, because we kind of think it should be easy to receive. And it's not. It really isn't. On some level, if being loved is the act of you being seen exactly as you are and accepted exactly as you are, then on some level, it's very easy for feedback to instantly be perceived as a lack of love, right? If I say, I would need more of this, it's possible. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not inviting you to take on this context, but have compassion from this place to see like, wow, any feedback can very quickly be construed as a lack of love because it's suggesting I go or be or end up somewhere different than exactly the way I am right now. It's not the case, but we can have a lot of compassion for ourselves as a result. Andrew says, our conversations never really start with, he's talking about he and his wife, hey, I've got feedback for you. No, they rarely do, right? So the feedback isn't distinguished. It comes across as I'm angry at you, you are annoying me right now. So my response back is defensiveness. This has been a great topic for me to even notice that it could be a totally different way of approaching conversation together, stating that I've got feedback or she's got feedback for me and being somber about it. Alexandra says, I would love to hear more about this intimacy practice you two have. Not sure if you'd be open to sharing that. I am. I know I could benefit from that in my relationship. So let me just check. I think we've got more time. Let's dive into that. And thanks for asking, Alexandra. So the art of sacred intimacy is rooted in the art of learning to work with polarity. And polarity is best thought of like the two ends of a battery, the positive end and the negative end. The reason a battery conducts electricity is because you have two poles that are they're oppositely charged. And so that creates the spark, the arc, the chemistry. In relationships, that in life, that polarity is there. That is the essence of two sexes, of masculine and feminine, or whatever you want to call them, is polarity. That polarity exists energetically throughout the world, and it's written about time and again. The Tao Te Ching, yin yang, the way of the Tao, polarity is present constantly. And you can, I might assert as far as like polarity is something that is imbued in the very fabric of the universe. There's the nothingness, the void, and then there is creation, everything else. So started with two people, then we went really broad, and then we're going to come back to two people. So in sacred intimacy, we are working to create polarity with one another, with the partner, the second body that we are working with. Minimize this chat window. Get out of here, chat window. And typically in relationships, none of this is distinguished or considered. We just fuck, right? We get together and have sex. And at first we're chemically infatuated with one another. It's hot and we don't have a lot of defensiveness. So like we can come together and it's like, yeah, sex rules. It does. Sex is great. But over time, there's more and more baggage. And then what happens is we fall into the default state of polarity for us. So in some relationships, what that can look like is both people get into like an alpha and alpha state. More traditionally, this would be called a masculine and masculine state. So that would be like very goal driven, very purpose driven, very kind of linear, very above it all, kind of transcending and seeing the moment with altitude. They are not in the moment feeling it, they are conscious of the moment. And so when you see couples like this is sort of like power couples. You know, there's a like a, they're really good at like leading together. Maybe they can get a job done. They're really good business partners. But because they're both in a state of alpha, there's not a lot of polarity, right? It's like a battery that has a positive and a positive. There's not going to be any kind of arc. You can also see relationships that get very much an omega and omega, more traditionally be called the feminine and the feminine pole, where both of them are very loving, very tender, both of them very like in the feeling of the moment. So they're not transcending and witnessing with consciousness the moment. They're not above the moment. They descend into the moment. They are swept away in the moment by moment, swept away in the moment by moment. And so in those kind of relationships where that's the predominant way they're relating with one another, it's very lovely and there's a lot of tenderness and caring, but it's sort of like two really good friends. There's a lot of sweetness, but there's not a lot of cosmic fuck because there's not a lot of polarity. And then you also can see relationships where like the sex stays really hot, but they squabble like cats and dogs. They like fight and it's like loud and explosive and they kind of like blow each other apart. It's very explosive in the relationship because they have all polarity and no capacity to like work within it and to find like what would work, what would serve this moment. This applies regardless of genders. This isn't about a man and a woman. This could be two gay men, two bears, or two I don't know gay terms. There's a lot of them it seems, or two lesbians, or two queer people who don't relate to having genders. There's still the arc of the polarity that is present that creates the spark. So in sacred yoga practice, we are starting with presence with one another. And oh, you all right, Grims? That's too intense, this polarity convo. So what we are doing is we are beginning with the basis of creating presence with one another, which happens from eye gazing. So I sit and I look into Bay's left eye and she looks into my left eye being our receiving eye, the right eye being our transmitting eye, at least spiritually. That's the first stage. If there's no presence, it's sort of like that's the foundation for everything. And then what we do is we work with practices that call forward polarity from one another. So remember, I talked about like the alpha energy is kind of transcendent. You are operating in your alpha energy if you are at a job and there's a bunch of like shit going down and you're kind of like looking above it and sort of like, okay, what do we need to do? When you're doing like triage or like problem solving or that's very alpha. When you are sort of sitting with your friend and really empathetically like feeling the depth of their grief about having a pet pass away, you are in omega energy. So alpha is transcendent and sees. It sees all of this. Whereas omega is rather than being transcendent, rather than going up, it sort of omega goes down into the moment. It loses the self by sort of being washed into the moment. It becomes the moment in all of its essence. So alpha, the partner practicing in the alpha state, sees. I see, and shares what they see. This is just an asana I'm providing in practice. And the partner in the omega state practices I feel. And so I feel sad and closed in this moment. And then alpha might share like, I see that I've hurt you, or I see that like things feel tough for you right now. And then the omega partner would then, what do I feel now? Back and forth. And so what's happening is these partners are using like an asana, a yogic practice, to slowly develop a polarity that exists between the two and work with it. The beautiful thing about there's a whole bunch of practices like this. Like sometimes we're working with that. Sometimes we're working with like something more sexual, something more intimate or touching or stuff like that. So it has a whole range. Sometimes it's more sexual in nature. The cool thing about this sort of practice is a yogic practice, an asana brings us into the moment and has us address whatever our kinks are in the moment through the practice. So in traditional models of like, by the way, good transformational coaching also works in the moment. Have the client do the thing right now. In more traditional models of like therapy, what you're doing is you're kind of like resolving the issue, the trauma of the past through like talking about it, exploring it, unraveling it, learning about like how did that come into being, what would there be to take on, blah, 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 all of that sort of stuff. So maybe growing up, you had a parent that yelled at you a lot and told you to shut up. And so as a result, your voice, your throat chakra, if you like, is very constricted. You don't have a lot of capacity to just let out your expressiveness. When the moment is calling for you to scream or to sob or to be angry or something like that, you don't have any capacity to allow that. You get caught here. And so all your energy is constricted in your throat. That's going to be a barrier for Omega. Someone that has had that experience will be more comfortable operating in Alpha, because rather than be in the moment and let it out, right? To be Omega would be just and just burst into tears to allow that energy to move through them. It's safer because of the way they were raised to transcend the moment and operate in Alpha. That way they don't have to feel the stuckness, the awful feeling that can't move, that energy can't move. So in traditional therapeutic models, you might like explore what's going on, blah, 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 and then do some work and then come back next week and look at it more and so on and so forth. What's beautiful about two-body practice and sacred yoga is that we might be practicing like me offering Bay feedback, and my feedback may be what I would need to feel the depth of your heart more, my love, is to have you scream at the top of your lungs. And that asana, that practice is going to have Bay address the block right there in the moment. She's not going and exploring why is that, how did that come to be, blah, blah, blah. And it's not to suggest there might not be times for that, but it brings her to the moment and allows her to work with the kink in the moment. And that's part of the magic of yogic practice. That's part of the magic of transformational coaching that has us do it now, is because then we actually get over the hump right now with the support of teachers or coaches that can really help us, rather than think about it, think about what we're going to do. Did you do the thing? No, I avoided it, or I just got too busy. Okay, let's come back, so on and so forth. So that's the heart of deep yogic practice. And what's so infuriating about it is it's two-body practice. So like I do my best to sit and hold space, and then if Bay doesn't show up, well, what do you know? I get knocked off my space because I'm annoyed and judging her for not showing up the right way. So, and then that is sort of me getting drawn into the moment rather than being able to stay above the moment and love this woman in front of me and hold the space and breathe for both of us and honor us. Hey, Drew, nice to see you, man. Drew sharing, do it now. And that's the heart of good yogic practice. Just like as we do physical, more, not Ayurvedic, like I always forget the names of of physical yoga, Ashtanga. Like, for example, one example of how one of those asanas allowed me to confront something was as a kid, I always witnessed nerds, of which I was one, but like my judgment, nerds bend over and then you could see their underwear, open them up for a wedgie, or they just looked like, what a dork, look at his underwear. And so I learned never bend down in such a way that my underwear might stick out. Fascinating to me. So I'd always bend down at the knees. I'd never bend over. So my ass was right there, full moon. And anytime my shirt rode up, I'd pull it back down. And then I'm sitting in yoga class doing downward dog. And of course, my shirt hikes up. And I'm like, I want to, And so the beauty of that yoga is that asana brought me to that moment again. And it allowed me to start to work through that just by virtue of bringing me into it. So really beautiful sacred yoga. It has us confront these moments in the moment. I'm going to come back to your question, Alexandra. Richard writes, the practice of being is fascinating. For me, it's a constant connection to the present and the belief that you are connected to universal knowledge and patterns. This is where the sense of humor comes from, cosmic humor. I can't be present all the time, but I'm always asking myself how to be. It's so hard to be present all the time, but the fun is that you are aware that you aren't. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My coach sometimes says, the only way for us to walk our path is to walk off of it and then realize we've walked off our path and come back to it. That's the only way. If you're always on your path, that's not very realistic. And so she says, the beauty of that is even when you're off your path, you're actually on it because that's how you find your way back onto it. And usually in the moments where she says something like that, I'm frustrated with myself, like, ah, fuck, I shouldn't be here. And that doesn't land then. But then like a few days later, I'm like, that's cool. See you, Mia. Alexandra asks, and then we'll start to wind down here. This is interesting and helpful. Are there any resources you can further recommend on this? Books or teachers or anything else? Absolutely. The teachers that Bay and I work with that I think are phenomenal, and you probably know I have a high standard for the teachers I work with, um, are Justin Patrick and London Angel Winters. And I'm going to find their book here for you on Amazon. Yerp. Aha, here it is. They wrote in 2015. They've written two books. This one is phenomenal. It's called The Awakened Woman's Guide to Everlasting Love. Facebook, let me write a comment. There we go. Boom. There's the link. Their work's fantastic. You can follow along with them. They sometimes do videos. They're both phenomenal and awesome people. I really love both of them. And their books, their writings, they do courses. You can go to Florida and work with them in intensives that they do. And they're really deep in this work. And Lennon's book I would recommend for both men and women. It's something just like Alison Armstrong's book, The Queen Code, which is a bit different, but still a phenomenal book. I'm going to find that for you too. Alison Armstrong, The Queen's Code. The Queen's Code is a fabulous book for, it's a book that's a little confronting for some people because it's a book that ultimately empowers women to create the relationships they want. And what that means is taking ownership for how they're creating their men and how they're creating their men in a way that they don't want. So sort of like my man is lazy and he doesn't do this stuff. The Queen's Code is like, let's take a look and see how you're creating your man that way. How are you responsible for that? Not so that the man doesn't have to take a look at any of his stuff, but just so that you can be the leader of the relationship you want. So it's a bit confronting for people that are like, they should just change, right? That are kind of locked in the reaction to the patriarchy. But it's a phenomenal book. It's super good. And I really recommend that book for men and women as well. And I really wish Alison would write a book for men called like The King's Code with maybe a K, but she hasn't. So I can't recommend that. All right. Well, as we always must do, we have to wind down because there's a weekend in front of us. We're going to all do awesome stuff. I'm going to put on a pair of armored jeans, armored gens, Buffalo. I'm going to go and cruise around town on the one wheel. I'm going to scoot around the ocean and enjoy the sun. And then I'm going to go have a friend with lunch with an old friend. And I'm seeing tomorrow, I'm very excited. I'm meeting for lunch one of my oldest friends who I've not been in touch with for 20 years. He, my best man at my wedding, and I all got into raves at the same time. And his path veered quite a bit from me and my best friends. But we're going to get together for lunch and reminisce about old times and bust out some dance moves. So I hope you've got an awesome weekend planned. Love y'all. Who Do You Think You Are is launched in 9 short days. It's going to be awesome. Put it on your calendar. September 12th. Who do you think you are? Love you guys. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.